the best way to actually create change in your life is to create a new baseline from your nervous system, because your nervous system is what you default back to. Everything is within. Everything is energy. So when you're trying to create change, but you're not regulating your nervous system, you're not doing the healing from within, you're just going to go back to your old ways and you're just going to keep manifesting from that place. Now, when I left my very toxic relationship, my nervous system was a wreck. Now I own my own business. I'm on my healing journey. We're always healing, by the way. It doesn't stop. But I have created things in my life from changing my nervous system, from going within. And then everything has just fallen into place. I teach you how to live effortlessly. And to live effortlessly, you need to allow yourself for things to plop into your life. That can happen. That has happened to me. But we have to start doing things differently. Nothing changes if nothing changes. Now, I dated this guy, okay, back in my early 20s, and he was marriage material. But where my frequency was at, where my nervous system was at, where I was vibrating at, was in chaos. I was kind of like into like the emotionally unavailable bad boys. And for someone to come into my life who was actually calm, regulated, emotionally available, mature, my nervous system couldn't handle it. It was used to chaos. Even the friends I surrounded myself with, it was full of drama, gossip. I was stepping on eggshells around my friends because of their reactions. And so when I started dating this guy, he was giving me all this love, but I couldn't sustain what he was giving me. All that love, I couldn't hold on to it, and my body was naturally rejecting it. This is sometimes, not in every case, but at least for me, my body was rejecting his love because of my nervous system. My nervous system was used to drama and chaos. And so I didn't love and respect myself enough to sustain the frequency of love he was giving me. And so when it came to my toxic breakup, this is where my life shattered. I became a single mum to a 2-month-old, and it woke me up. It's like something inside of me. It's like I'd been living on autopilot, and I just woke up to life. And when you're still living on autopilot, which I know that you're most likely awake now since you're watching this video, but when we're living on autopilot, we're not looking at our behaviors, our reactions, what we're manifesting. We think this is just how life is and there's nothing that we can do about it. But what we're manifesting into our life is because of the baseline of our frequency. And so we're attracting everything on that frequency. I like to describe it as, say, a tower car park. You got all the levels in the car park. And depending what level you're on in regards to, say, each level is in regards to an emotion, right? We've got jealousy, resentment, anger, stress, and then we've got happiness, joy, peace, authenticity. So each level car park that you're parked on represents an emotion. And whatever level you are parked on, you attract things on that level. On that frequency is what you are attracting in life. And so you'll find that something will wake you up in life. Mine was my breakup. It could be an illness, it could be a job loss, whatever it may be. And so now it's time to do things differently. Nothing changes if nothing changes. And that wake up call, it does something. You become consciously aware of how you've been behaving and reacting and what you've been calling into life. And then from there, we go into reflection. This is where you change within to then create differently in your outer world. You start reflecting on, well, why did I attract this in life? Why am I constantly in struggle? Why am I constantly attracting chaos in relationships, gossip and drama in friendships? Why are my friends not supporting me? And it's because we need to start looking at, we need to start looking within. We need to start looking at where our standards are, where our self-respect is. Because where our self-respect is where our boundaries are either there or not there. What we're saying yes to and what we're saying no to, what we're allowing in. And so on my journey, I decided to stay single. I didn't want to be bringing any man like in and out of my daughter's life. So I had to learn to become my own best friend. This is where we have to start making conscious decisions. I decided to learn to be on my own and regulate my nervous system from there. And it was uncomfortable to learn to be on my own and not just go to my default of dating, getting external validation, and whatnot. And naturally, friends who weren't in alignment with me started falling away, whether it was just naturally distancing itself or there was a fallout of some kind. Things started naturally happening because I started consciously making new decisions. And when you start becoming awake and you start doing things differently, things will naturally fall away because it can't sustain your frequency. And so learning how to be on my own was one of my life lessons. And it was lonely, but lonely is a choice is what I found. It was lonely at the time because I had nothing to go off. I had no idea who I was. I had no idea what, like, I was a shell of a person by the time I left this relationship. So I had to rediscover who I was, what I wanted to do, what my purpose was, what were my likes or my dislikes. I had no idea. I had no hobbies, no interests. And so I decided to get curious. And so whilst I was learning to be on my own, whilst I was learning to be curious about who I was and what I liked, my nervous system was starting to recalibrate. It was starting to calm down, but in the sense of my identity. My outside world was in shambles. So it felt chaotic, it felt messy. But internally, because I started doing things differently, because I started learning how to be on my own, I started creating a new baseline for myself. I started having self-respect and not just allowing anybody into my life. And when I would date someone and they weren't right for me, I could say bye-bye. And so that's what would happen. And so from that shift, everything started to change. Not all at once, but just in fragments. You got to think of it like as like a jigsaw puzzle. And little things, like little tiny jigsaw puzzle pieces were coming in ever so slowly. And so that's when money started to change, relationships started to change in regards to friendships and dating. That's when everything started to be at ease. And so going back to what I said before, in order to create change, we have to go within. We go into this reflection mode because whatever's there underneath, whatever emotion you are feeling, the anger, the stress, the resentment, the jealousy, whatever it may be, that's the place you are radiating from. So this is the place that we need to heal. When someone just walks into a room and their aura is just so beautiful, that's because they've changed something within. The energy you radiate is from the changes within. Now, you don't necessarily have to be the most outwardly beautiful person to radiate beauty. It's an energy. Everything is energy. And so when you finally start addressing those negative emotions, that's when you begin to heal. That's when you begin to create change. That's when your aura shifts. That's when your aura starts expanding. That's when your skin starts to look completely different, because your skin reflects your internal reality, your standards, your self-talk, the conversations you have, your standards in life. Your skin reflects everything. So your physical appearance will change. But for me, I had to learn how to be on my own. That's what one of my life changes were. When I started getting curious, it's like money was going outwardly and wasn't necessarily coming back in. But now I'm starting to reap the awards. Now all that study I did, all the books I bought, the online courses, the mentoring I invested in, all that money is now starting to come back because I invested in myself. I started doing things consciously. I started putting myself first and getting myself happy. When you do that, what you attract completely changes. You have to get happy. And when you make that decision, everything will fall apart, because whatever's not making you happy is going to fall away because you've set that intention to get happy. So then the universe starts recalibrating, it starts realigning. And that's when friendships fall away, relationships fall apart, the job loss. All of that happens because you start making different choices and you start living consciously. And so, unfortunately, you have to sit with what's there. When you address the negative emotions, you just have to sit with it. You have to be with it. That's what creates the change. It's actually ever so simple that we feel like it's not going to work, that it has to be something harder that we have to do. No, when you try and change by force, that's when you meet resistance. When you sit with the emotions, sitting in your bed, sitting in your chair, and you just be like, and you're not going to want to do this, by the way. This is not something that you're going to want to do, but make it into a ritual. Light a candle, light some incense, and make it into something beautiful that makes you want to do it. And just say to yourself, you're going to trick your body. Say to yourself, I'm only just going to do it for 2 minutes, because that feels doable. Your body's like, okay, yeah, I can handle 2 minutes. And then you end up sitting there for 10, 20 minutes. And so sit with it. You don't need to do anything apart from just maybe reflecting on why you're feeling this way. So when you sit with yourself and you're just sitting with that anger or that jealousy, ask why. That's it. And when you get the why, you're going to take the first thing that comes to mind. And you may not get an answer straight away, and that's okay. Nothing may come up because you're not used to doing something like this. And that is okay. Just sit with it and see what comes up. I recommend doing 20 minutes. And then just keep asking further questions. Well, where did this come from? Why do I feel this way? And things will start making sense. Things will start clearing. Things will start coming to the surface that you had no idea was even there. That's where the change happens. That's where your nervous system starts recalibrating. That's where you start raising your frequency. And it's all from just sitting within. It's just sitting there and being with it and crying it out. Now, I'm very I'm quite an emotional person. And so I just cry things out. And when I've cried it out, I've discharged the active emotions to that situation, to that person. When you cry things out, when you have that release, you create an emotional discharge and it leaves your body. From that point on, now it could take a few weeks, it could take a few months, depending what you're going through. It could just take a day even, depending what it is. But when you do that, you're able to move on, feeling completely detached. It just becomes a chapter of your life or a person that was just in your life. You remember them, but there's no emotional charge to the situation or the person. And that's how things change. That's how you start radiating a different aura, a different energy. And that's where your behaviors and reactions start to shift. The more you can do this, the better, because that's when love feels regulated. When we're used to chaos, when a person is regulated and emotionally available, they feel boring because your nervous system is still used to the chaos and the drama. So we have to sit with ourselves. And naturally, you'll naturally create changes. You'll naturally start to want different things for yourself. But it takes time. Again, these are not things that you can force into your life. It naturally ever so happens to be. And all it takes is reflection and sitting within and feeling all the things that you don't want to feel. That's the hard part. It's not actually hard, but it's feeling all the things that we don't want to be feeling. But that's where everything shifts. When you raise your frequency by allowing these emotions out of your body, because these emotions are your baseline. When you release all of that, that's when money starts to become easier. Everything is entangled. Everything is energy. Money is energy. Opportunities, jobs, friends, everything is energy. And and Eckhart Tolle says a lot about this, but the more present you are, the more shifts that you create internally, the more you attract in life. You attract what your nervous system is regulating at. So that job will fall in. So actually, what happened for me was when I came out of my breakup, so I became a single mum and my daughter was 2 months old. So after my breakup, we went straight into court. It was like a whole court proceeding. It was horrific. Going through that time, having no idea how I was going to support my daughter being only 2 months old, no idea what I wanted to do in life. It was havoc. My nervous system was in havoc. And when I finally got my job, it landed in my lap because it came at a time that I was finally regulated enough to go and work. I couldn't bring myself to work at the time. I couldn't think of anything outside of what I was going through. I couldn't hold my friends in the way that they needed to be heard and seen because of what I was going through. It was so heavy, chaotic, but ever so slowly, as I started regulating myself, getting used to court, which is something that you don't want to be doing, I started getting to the point where I was like, okay, I'm ready now. I'm ready to find a job. And the job landed in my lap. I did not have to create a resume. I did not have to go speaking to shop owners. What happened was, this is how everything, like when you're regulated, this is how everything can fall into place for you. So not to say don't make a resume and, take that aligned step. This is just what happened for me because I stayed patient. I regulated my nervous system ever so naturally just by doing the inner processing of crying it out, screaming into my pillow, talking it out with my friends, and taking accountability for what I attracted into my life, looking at, okay, but why did I attract this person into my life? Like all these processings that were going on was me naturally recalibrating my nervous system. So I had this next door neighbor as a kid. For a while, we moved. I then saw her back in high school. High school finished. I hadn't seen her in 15 years. Naturally, we just bump into each other one day. Our kids are the same age, they're toddlers, and she had, just like me, moved back from the city to our country home where we grew up, and she was working at a clothing shop. Obviously I told her everything that's happening into my life, and I'm about to start looking for work. 3 months into bumping into her, this woman walks into her shop, asks if she knows anybody that is looking for work that is a beauty therapist by trade, which I was. It was not something I was looking to get back into. This is just when I, was starting to dabble in spirituality. I had gone and done my very first, you could say like spiritual course of Reiki. And she just happened to ask, do you know anyone that's looking for a job, is a beauty therapist by trade, and has a Reiki certificate? So I had just completed this Reiki certificate like a month or two prior. So she gives her my number. I get the phone call. I go in, and it is heavenly. There are candles everywhere. It's a candlelit setting with Turkish lamps everywhere. It's beauty therapy, but not in the traditional sense. We had a lot of like cancer patients that would come in. It was like respite. Whilst we did massage and facials, it was more for rest. And a lot of people that came in were burnt out parents, burnt out in their job, going through an illness. And then they would come and stay with us. There was a homestead down the road that they would stay, and then they would come and see us and get treatments for 3 hours at a time. And by the time they left, a lot of people stayed mostly for about 10 days. And, you can just come in and get a facial and a massage. Like, you don't have to be, going through one of those things. It can just be, I just want to come in for a massage or a facial. But for the most part, this is what we did. And after the 10 days, this one particular cancer patient, and this is what rest does, she said that she halved her medication and she was getting a lot more sleep at night. All because her body just needed rest, not doing her homely duties. She was away from her environment. Her cells were able to start regenerating, replenish themselves. And as she was doing that, as she was just resting, her body was starting to heal itself. She was recalibrating her nervous system. Another lady, she was a burnt out mum. She came in, I think, she stayed for about 7 days, I think. And I remember coming in and just seeing like her face, it morphed. I've never seen anything like it in my life, and I haven't since. But her face morphed. I can't tell you what changed, but I can tell you it was the energy she was radiating. It shifted her energy. It shifted her physical appearance somehow. It was the most incredible thing. She physically looked different, but I couldn't pinpoint what it is. But I knew it's because her energy shifted. Her aura changed because of rest. And we did my boss did a bit of one-on-one counseling with these people. So they started learning to love themselves within that time too. Understanding why everything was happening the way that it was, because it comes down to self-respect, self-love. And so that's what regulating your nervous system does. From there, you can start to create change. Now, I don't date people who are chaotic, drama, emotionally unavailable. All of my friends now are potent people. They're not people I have to tippy-toe about. There's no gossip. There's no drama. My life is so peaceful. So peaceful. But it took time. It was a journey. It's taken me 7 years to get to the point at where I am now, where I have my own business. And so, again, things will naturally start to shift for you the minute you start creating change. And by watching this video, I already know that you already have that intention. Things will start to fall into place. All you have to do is be with yourself. Don't force things to happen. When you're trying to force yourself to behave in a certain way, maybe you want to be calmer with your kids. It has to come from just feeling what's going on, because otherwise you're going to your default baseline of, like, you're trying to create change from the surface and not within. When you start, again, feeling those emotions, your body starts regulating. And from there, you naturally start to behave differently. You're not creating change from the surface. So I hope that makes sense. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube, please subscribe. I do one-on-one coaching, tarot readings. So please, all the links are below. Leave beautiful comments, and I'll see you in my next video.